Hi, everybody. It's Dave Matson, CEO of Sandler Training. I want to thank you for joining today. As our topic for today is prospecting. You know, and I think prospecting is probably one of the most feared aspects, the things that we have to do in sales. I think everyone thinks they're a great schmoozer, everyone thinks they're a great closer, but the topic that continually comes up in our training centers throughout the country is, how do I become a better prospector? Get me in front of somebody and I can do my thing, but get me in front of net new people. How do you do that? And so I think it's one of those things that we're always trying to figure out how to do. And even so today, I know we've got people jumping on left and right on this call. We have over 5,000 people that actually registered today. And some are Sandler people, so I want to thank you for being a Sandler client and your support over the years. A lot of you actually have sent me, we've met potentially at the Sandler Summit in Orlando that we have every year, have sent me great success stories about how Sandler has helped you really take your game to the next level. So if you've got those, continue to send me an email. Love to read them. You know my email address if you're a Sandler client. It's dmatson@sandler.com. Please send it to us. And for those that aren't Sandler clients, I want to welcome you as well. Let me give you about 2 seconds of who we are so we can put today into context. You know, we have 265 training centers, and we've won tons of awards. I mean, we've won Best Sales Training, Best Management Training, Best Overall Training. I think as CEO, the one that makes me the most proud is the highest ROI, which means if you do it on your own or if you bring somebody else in and you stack them against Sandler, outside study, time in and time again, will say we've got the highest return on investment, which means we give you the tools to succeed. And that's really what you're going to see today. You know, we're experts in sales. We've got the Sandler selling system, which is awesome. It takes people from establishing rapport all the way to the close. We've got Sandler enterprise selling, longer selling cycles, team sales, you know, more sophisticated sales process. And we've got sales management, anything from finding good people to making sure that our people are just blowing through those goals. So we've got an awful lot, but anything that we do is really focused in on how to make you more productive as a salesperson or a sales leader. And so today, we've got a real treat. We've got John Rosso, who is one of our trainers. As I said, we've got 265 training centers. So we've got 600 trainers out there, and John Rosso has been with us for over 20 years, and he has won the coveted David H. Sandler Award, which is a real honor within our organization. He's also authored Prospect the Sandler Way, and we're in for a real treat because, as usual, if you're a Sandler client, you know this, we've got about 5 days of material that we're going to give you over the next 51 minutes. So you're in for a great ride. John, welcome.
Thank you, David. Appreciate the invitation. Very excited.
So, John, you know prospecting's a hot topic, right? So there's a lot to cover today. I know we're going to talk about the phone calls and some emails today. So should we talk about the approach?
Yeah, let's talk about the approach. We've actually got a bunch of questions being emailed in, like, I find it challenging to get to the CEO. How do I get to the CEO? How do I handle voicemail? Are there ways to leverage social media and LinkedIn? Are there ways to find people's email addresses? How do I differentiate myself? Those are the questions that are coming in now, and we'll deal with them all today, so absolutely. And I think, Dave, one of the ways to start is talking about approach call mistakes. And in my last calculation, I had either coached or listened to, in my 22 years with Sandler Training, about 100,000 calls. That's a lot of calls.
That's a lot of calls.
And that's a lot of calls. And the strange part is when you have someone new to Sandler, been in sales, but new to Sandler, I hate to say it, but they all kind of sound the same. And so let's talk a little bit about some of the mistakes before we move into what can we do differently or better. And one of the mistakes I see, I call it a hate crime, HAYT, stands for how are you today? And it's a nervous tick for many salespeople where it sounds like ring, ring, ring. This is Dave. Oh, hey, Dave. Hi. John Rosso at ABC Widget International. How are you today? And most of the people I've coached and I've talked to is they can literally sense that the prospect's defense wall descending as they go, fine, what do you got? or some version of that. So let's not fall into those traps. Another one is I say you've got to learn to be unjust. The amount of wimpy language or less than language, we find ourselves using words like just. Like here's a typical bad email. And if you're on the phone and you've done this, you're like most of the people we're coached, don't feel bad, just do something different. But I hear these voicemails that sound like this. You've reached Dave's voicemail. Please leave a message. Beep. Oh, hey, Dave. Hi, John Rosso from ABC Widget Company. Listen, I just wanted to reach out to you and see if you had any concerns with regard to your widgets. We were started in 1948. We are the world's widget leader, and I just wanted to take some time to reach out to you, perhaps have a few minutes to talk. If you get a minute, if you can please call me back. It's John Rosso at 888-555-1212. I hope you're having a great day, Dave. That's the typical call. And from everything I hear, it's a 1%, it's a 2% response rate, and people are *7 deleting that. And so there's got to be a better way so they can smell it. So, Sandler had a great rule that said prospects are like Dobermans. They can smell the fear. And so as we get caught in sing-songy, cotton candy, mother may I, oh, hey, just call in to sort of reach out, sing-songy, all of those things are tells. They're signals that we don't necessarily belong there, and they keep us out. So we've got to find a way to break the rules. Sandler has been great in its career in learning how to break the rules. We've got to break the rules and interrupt people's patterns and structure our conversations in a more equal business stature fashion.
So, John, do you think that if 1% of the people are successful with the hate crimes, that singy-songy thing that they do, which I've heard a million times. I'm on the receiving end of all these calls as well, right? Have we just as salespeople said to ourselves, hey, that's the stats? Because I don't think they've really realized that there is a better way to do it or a more successful way to do it. I think we're just stuck in the rut because we don't know any better.
Listen, what happens, and we talk about this, is your belief system ultimately dictates your results. And if it hasn't worked and you get a 1% return rate, well, you've come to the belief that it doesn't work. I don't leave voicemails anymore. No need. And in ideal best practice, and this is a stretch, but if you can get somewhere between 15 and 40% return calls, you ought to be throwing parties. Because if you used to be getting 1% and now you're getting 15, that's a 1,500% improvement, tremendous, and we're having more conversations. And ultimately, if we have more conversations, we have more appointments or more opportunity calls, and more opportunities calls, of course, lead to more sales. So I think it's become ingrained in people because they've done it poorly. They've given up doing it, and there are better ways.
Yeah, I think when I started in sales, I have to tell you, I did everything I could to avoid making calls, prospecting in any way, shape, or fashion, until I went to a Sandler program way back in '86, and I found out that there was a formula, and once I got that down and I understood that there is a methodology, and I can change my talk tracks, and I know you're going to share that with us, but the structure of the approach call, which you're going to share with us, that I learned really changed my world. And I went from that typical 1%, my numbers went through the roof, and it was because of all the things that you're about to share with us. So I'm a big believer in that for sure. So walk us through the structure.
Sure, and like anything, there's a good beginning, middle, and an end, and where people largely screw up is the beginning and the end. They can handle the middle a little bit, and I'm going to give you some coaching on the middle, but the beginning is huge. And when I look at the beginning, I'm looking at three things: what we would call the pattern interrupt, your mini upfront contract, and a personal connection. And I'll talk about each of these, but that's sort of the beginning. If I can use my first 8 to 12 seconds to lower that prospect's defense wall and then sell, in quotes sell, a 3 to 5 minute discussion, I'm much better than the guy who blurts it all out and his 30 seconds he's gone with, yeah, I'm not interested, thank you, click. So there's a beginning, and then in that middle where I'm fishing for pain, I've got to really learn, and we'll talk about this, I've got to really learn how to kind of get inside of that head of the prospect and tell good, compelling third-party stories that are much more about his or hers challenges and problems and needs and wants and pain, rather than my features and benefits of being started in 1947 and the largest this and the largest that, and then ultimately closing it strong. I see so many people run pretty good calls and then lose it with a weak, wimpy, or non-directive close. So we've got to close for a clear next step or an appointment, learn how to set good agendas for those appointments, and ultimately post-sell or rehearse the buyer on the commitment they're making so there are no backouts. So there's a beginning, middle, and an end, and we can talk through each of those, Dave.
So John, before we go into it, because I know you're going to give us tons of tactics. I mean, you are the ultimate tactician. Let me ask you a question, because when you're on a call, if we get a 1% hit rate, most of us are so excited that somebody picked up the phone that we go in from appointment getting to sales mode and completely blow why we're there. So do you have an idea as far as the ultimate purpose of these when we actually get a live person? Is it to get the appointment and then close and get out? Or is it, thank goodness, oh my gosh, I talked to a live person, and 18 hours later you're still rambling?
Right. We sort of call it driving by the exit, right? If they knew their objective was to either get the appointment or schedule a phone appointment or a webinar for a clear next step, they drove right past it. They kept talking for 18, 20, 24 minutes, and pretty soon the prospect goes, really no need to meet or no need to schedule that conference call. We've already had it. So we do need to understand our objective is to really schedule a clear next step. For some people, that's a face-to-face. For some people, it's a web demo. For some people, it's an ongoing conversation. But that's true even if you're going to continue. Even if it's the same call that ends up being a 30-minute call, there's the prospecting piece. That's over in 3, 4, 5 minutes, and then it transitions to the sales call, or essentially your exploratory discovery call. It may be the same call, but it's two different pieces of the sales process.
Okay, so walk us through the components. If I look at the structure of an approach call, let's start with the pattern interrupt.
Sure. So a pattern interrupt, by definition, is anything other than a conditioned response. You walk into a store, a retail store, and the retail clerk jogs up to you and says, "Hi, may I help you?" A conditioned response would be, "No, thanks, just looking." Right? So don't get caught in conditioned responses. I need to do anything else other than, "Hi, my name is John. I'm with ABC Widget Company. How are you today?" So I'll give you some examples. Now, these are my words. If you like them, steal them. If not, find a way to fit them into your own style. But an example of a pattern interrupt would be this. Ring, ring, ring. This is Dave. And notice the tonality. Tonality on a phone call is probably 80 to 85% of your effectiveness. So again, words and templates matter, but really understand we're looking for equal business stature. So ring, 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 this is Dave. Hey Dave, John Rosso. Dave, I'm looking for a little bit of help. Let me tell you the reason why I'm calling, put a little bit of context around our situation, and then you and I can figure out if it makes sense to talk further if that works. That's an example of a pattern interrupt or with a mini upfront contract. So most people are used to hearing inflection that goes high. This is Dave. Oh, hey, Dave, John. Right? You can hear that sort of questioning inflection going high, as opposed to something that's a little bit more equal business stature, a little bit more authoritative. This is Dave. Hey, Dave, John Rosso. It's kind of the way I might talk to my kids once in a while. Hey, Joe, come to dinner. Right? So a little bit more authoritative. I personally like, Dave, I'm looking for some help. I don't know if it's going to make sense for you and I to speak. But that's a pattern interrupt. People are not used to hearing those words from salespeople. Let me put a little bit of context around our situation, and then you and I can decide if it makes sense to talk further. Would that work? And that should be, with bad tonality, that should be about a 90 to a 95%, sure. With good tonality, it should be 99.9 to 100%. And I'm using that first 8 to 12 seconds to sell a 3 to 5 minute conversation. But, you don't have to say that. There are people who say, ring, ring, ring. This is Dave. Hey, Dave, John Rosso. My guess is my name is not at all familiar in any way. Honestly, John, it doesn't sound familiar. Listen, not a problem. I wasn't sure it would be. Let me take a moment, share with you the reason why I'm calling, put a little bit of context around that conversation, and then you and I can figure out if we should talk further, if that works. And then both of those are kind of a combination of my pattern interrupt and my mini upfront contract. There are people who, if they're clearly in a world where they're selling to salespeople at times, a pattern interrupt could sound like this. Ring, ring, ring. This is Dave. Hey, Dave, John Rosso. Listen, Dave, if I told you I was making a cold call, would you want to hang up? Probably. I'm glad I didn't tell you I was making a cold call. And they laugh.
Yeah.
And I say, bottom line, let me take a minute, tell you the reason why I'm calling, put some context around the conversation. We'll figure out if it makes sense to talk. All of those are examples of pattern interrupt. You've got to find the one that resonates and fits your style, but no one is hanging up. There's curiosity created. Defense walls have come down a bit, and I'm selling a 3 to 5 minute conversation.
Okay, so let's talk about that for a second, because that's not a hate crime, right? Hey, how are you today? You know,
Right.
you just ooze salesperson. I love the tone, because that just comes across as, hey, I'm a CEO too, or I deserve to be in this, this discussion. But I like the curiosity. So you said it casually, but I just want to make sure before we go to the mini upfront contract that in the pattern interrupt, the person on the other side of the phone was not expecting your phone call. They're in the middle of something. They weren't sitting around saying, I wish a salesperson would call me right now. Wouldn't that be awesome that they could blow my day? And they're not saying that. So they're in the middle of something. So when you say, hey, Joe, John Rosso, Joe, I'm looking for a little help, they automatically stop what they're doing, thus the pattern interrupt. But it's the curiosity, John Rosso, John Rosso, John Rosso. How do I know you? How do I know you? How do I know you? And that is what I'm going to call a great conversation starter, because they've kind of just, as it says, pattern interrupt, they've stopped everything and now they're focused on you 100%. I love that, because I think a call that starts well tends to end well, John.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and people, notice I didn't say, you can do this, but your effectiveness will drop slightly. I didn't say, hey, Dave, John Rosso, ABC Widget Company.
Right.
I just said, hey, Dave, John Rosso, and let curiosity work for itself, and then reached out looking for a little bit of help. And again, I found phrases like, let me put a little bit of context around the reason I'm reaching out to you, and then we can decide if it's going to make sense to talk further. That's very peer-to-peer, business owner to business owner, executive to executive. It's kind of equal business stature, and it resonates well.
Yeah, so you've held the presentation at the end, and I know that's the Sandler way, but that's certainly true in the prospecting call, because I like what you just said, which is you didn't say John Rosso, XYZ Widget Company. They would have automatically decided before you said anything, do I need you or do I not? Right now, they know nothing except they're about to give you some time. So very cool. So tell us about what the mini upfront contract is, because we have some Sandler people and some non-Sandler people on the line today.
Yeah, if you take anything out of today, Sandler or currently non-Sandler, future Sandler students, please take the upfront contract. It is life-changing at every level, and certainly on the call. In fact, I can skip some pleasantries and even use the mini upfront contract as a pattern interrupt. This is Dave. Hey, Dave, John Rosso. Dave, let me tell you the reason why I'm calling, maybe put a little bit of context around the conversation, and then you and I can decide, does it make sense to talk further? Would that work? Sure. Right? So what it does is it's a mini agreement about time, agenda, and outcome. And time is, hey, we'll take a minute or two. And agenda is, I'll share with you the reason for the call. And then the outcome is, listen, we get to decide, or you get to decide, does it make sense to continue speaking or not? It really sets a very professional sort of platform that allows us then, with no pressure, this is a no pressure approach call, with no pressure to be able to sort of begin to talk through how we help organizations or how we help companies. With an agreement at the end, we'll simply have a conversation. Does it make sense to continue or not? So it really sets the stage and separates you in a huge way from almost everyone else making those phone calls.
Yeah, so I mean the highlights, and I know we're going to do personal connection, but I think here for the non-Sandler people, when you tell people, hey, can I take 2 minutes that everyone's going to give you 2 minutes. Your parents have told you be polite for a certain amount of time. I've yet to have somebody on a call saying, absolutely not. And if they did, they say, hey, I'm really busy. I understand. When's a good time for me to call? You still haven't told them why. They always say, well, what's it about? And now you're going to go right back into your script. So it's kind of cool. But the other thing is they're in total control, John. See, they get to decide whether it makes sense for you to continue talking or for you to meet or not. And that power, even though they have it now, but when you say you're in total control, whether you want to continue or not, those defense walls, you can almost hear them crash on the phone, and they're willing to give you the time. So I love that. It's very cool.
Yeah, and people have even said, you've caught me at a bad time. And I say, hey, listen, no worries. We'll talk another time. Dave, might it make sense to take 30 seconds to tell you the reason for the call? And then we can decide, should we even talk next? And they go, sure, that would be fine. And you're still in the call.
Right.
So, because some people are that hard to get a hold of that if I've got you, I don't want to let you go. But just think about the naturalness of this. You caught me at a bad time. No worries, Dave. I'll reach out again a different time. Hey, would it be helpful if I took 30 seconds to tell you why I was calling? And then you could tell me if we should even have that follow-on call. Sure, John, go ahead. And you're in a call. Right. So it's really it's a beautiful piece of poetry.
And you're doing it on behalf of them. You want to make sure that you're utilizing their time. You want to make sure, hey, they know what the call is about. Everything is for the buyer. And it's very conversational. So I love those points put together. And I think once you get better and better at this no pressure cold call, it'll come across just like John's doing it now. It's very conversational. So tell us about the personal connection.
Yeah, personal connection is newer. When I joined Sandler 22 years ago, we might have done it, but now with the internet and Google and LinkedIn, there's so many ways to draw a personal connection. The reason why people struggle with prospecting is things have changed. I mean, in the old days, in my early career was IBM, we could make a phone call and people would pick up. Right? We could leave a voicemail and people would return it. Email was newer. Things have changed. Now we've got committee decisions and gatekeepers and voicemails and social media. So let's leverage some of that technology. Now, the beautiful thing about a personal connection is a personal connection doesn't increase your conversations. I'm already on the phone with you. But what it does is increase the effectiveness of your conversations and continues to escalate you or differentiate you from your run-of-the-mill salesperson who's not doing any kind of effective research. Now, let me give you a caution. You do not want to spend 30 minutes researching a cold call because the odds of you getting that person are low, and you have just signed up for the Creative Avoidance Club. Ways to keep busy, not making calls. And ultimately, even with social selling 2.0, all the things that we'll hear, ultimately this has to culminate in a conversation. So a personal connection often can be one of three things. Certainly the easiest is if we have a person, right? If Dave Mattson referred me to Mike Montague, and it could have been a cold referral. It could have been, here's a cold referral. You may want to try Mike Montague over at Montague International. He might be able to use you. Right? It's not a real warm referral. Right? It could have even come off a cold call. In fact, when we teach people to make cold calls, even if you get a no, you know what, John, thanks for the time. Really not a need. We teach folks to say, hey, listen, Dave, not a problem. I appreciate your time. It doesn't sound like we can help you. Hey, quick question. Maybe you can help me. If you were me in my business, sales training, coaching, consulting, any recommendations of people in your circle, in your network who you think it may make sense to take a couple of minutes with, not unlike the call you had? Yeah, why don't you try Mike Montague over at Montague International? So it's not a warm referral. But let's say I get a hold of Mike. This is Mike. Hey, Mike, John Rosso. Mike, looking for just a little bit of help. I don't know if it's going to make sense for us to talk. Let me put a little bit of context around the conversation and then tell me if it's going to make sense to talk further. Fair enough? John, sounds great. Hey, listen, I just had a conversation with Dave Mattson over at Mattson Incorporated. He and I got around to talk about you and your company. He thought it might be important we speak. I promised him I would reach out to you. How nice is that? Rather than this, here's your condition response pattern instead of a pattern interrupt. Oh, hi, Mike. Listen, I got your name from Dave Mattson. I got your name. I mean, the minute you start using words like "I got your name," immediately we can feel that defense wall defend and that chill rise. Uh-oh, right? I got to get back at Dave now, right? So learn to be systematic, learn to be confident. So once I've got permission for the conversation, it's nice to say, hey, Mike, one of the reasons I'm reaching out is had a nice conversation with Dave Mattson at Mattson Incorporated. We got around to talking, Mike, about you and your business. He thought it might be important we speak. I promised him I would reach out to you. Oh, yeah, I know Dave. And immediately we're warm. So certainly one place to do a personal connection would be that referral transition, right? And by the way, we'll talk about this a little bit later, but you could leave that on a message. Instead of this message, ring, 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 you've reached Mike. Oh, hey, Mike, John Rosso at ABC Widgets. Listen, I got your name from Dave Mattson over at Mattson Incorporated. We are the world's leading widget manufacturers. I think we may be able to really help you in your widget production. Listen, if you can just give me a quick call back, and we squander all that leverage. Just leave a nice, equal business stature message that sounds like this. You've reached Mike's voicemail. Leave a message beep. Hey, Mike, John Rosso. Listen, just had a nice conversation with Dave Mattson over at Mattson Incorporated. He and I got around to talking about you and your business. He thought it might be important we speak. I promised him I would reach out to you. Mike, call me, John Rosso, 412 555-1212, 412-555-1212. Click. You're getting a call back. The curiosity and the equal business stature are rising up to have a reasonable business conversation.
I like that. So you're really leveraging. And I like the word choice. I think it's subtle, but it's there. And if I'm going to do a transition, what about the research? And I know you said, hey, don't spend a lot of time. Am I just taking the most recent thing that's gone on in that particular company or something that I could leverage? Or there's some pros and cons to that?
Well, there's in order of effectiveness, one, a personal connection, that's a person, a referral is the best. Mm-hmm. Second, if I can't find that connection, one of the things that I can do is research on you, the prospect I'm calling. Now, not everybody has available research on them, but if I was calling Joe Smith, and Joe Smith just gave a paper on the changing face of supply chain at the Worldwide Supply Chain Conference in Vegas, right? I get a chance to say, hey, Dave, one of the reasons I was reaching out is I had a chance to review the presentation you gave on the changing face of supply chain at Supply Chain International at Vegas this last October. And again, it separates me from the group that I'm one of those folks who have done a bit of my homework. Now, I don't want to spend too much time doing that. So again, I've got a personal connection that could be a person. Research about the person if possible. And I know in our book, Dave, we've collaborated on putting a lot of cool Google search tips and LinkedIn tips to find these things quickly. My goal in research is the ability to reduce by 95%. 95. If it was going to take you 10 minutes, it ought to take you a minute. If it's going to take you an hour, it ought to take you 10 minutes. And the third piece is relevant and recent news about a company. And that could come from a trade rag. That could come from Google alerts. That could come from searching Google, dropping down to the tools bar, and then searching this week, right? So again, an example would be, hey, Mike, John Rosso, looking for some help. Don't know yet if it's going to make sense for us to talk. Let me put a little bit of context around the conversation, and then we can figure out if it makes sense to talk further. Sure, John. Hey, just read in Crane's Business Review that you recently acquired or opened up a new plant in ABC, Ohio. And that's an example of research. So it's usually one of those three things. Again, it doesn't increase the conversation, but it increases the effectiveness of the conversations and then increases their interest in hearing more, because if you've done a little bit of homework, the likelihood of you saying something that can resonate with me increases fairly dramatically.
Yeah, I agree. And you brought up the Sandler book, and obviously you've authored that book, and that is one of the top-selling books for Sandler. We sell more books in the business space than anyone else, John's done a fantastic job taking all the Sandler tactics and strategies along with his experience and put them into one thing. And so if you go to Amazon, you'll have the opportunity at the end to get a discount to buy that book. That's awesome. And I just want to remind everybody as well that this is being recorded, so you can listen to this time in and time again, because there's a lot of little subtle one-liners that are getting thrown out here. So John, I know we talked about transition, and so you gave that over, which I love. And so the voicemail email wave is the same thing, just in a different medium.
Yeah, and you could use, when you think about prospecting, I want you to think about a campaign, meaning, some people say, I follow up with this guy all the time. And what they mean is they call him once every 3 months with the same terrible message. I just wanted to reach out. I was just following up. I just wanted to, or I would love to get together. All of those are weak language words. So think about using emails. Think about using in-mails. In-mails, of course, is the email version, if you will, that's internal to LinkedIn. And again, you may need a more premium version to be able to do in-mails, but it's available to you. Think about phone calls and all that sort of stuff that has to happen. And so the first three things that I talked about, the personal connections, you can use them on a voicemail. As I mentioned earlier, it could sound like ring, ring, ring. This is Dave's voicemail. Hey, Dave, John, Rosso. Hey, doing some research, had a chance to go through your presentation on the changing face of supply chain that you delivered in October at Supply Chain International in Vegas. Have a question or two. I think it could be valuable we speak. Call me. It's John Rosso, 888-555-1212, 888-555-1212. Click. Now notice after my clicks, I'm not doing a whole lot of Mother May I. I'm not doing a whole lot of, I know you're busy, Dave, and I appreciate it if you get a chance to just return a very quick phone call. None of that. We've shown that decreases the callback ratio because at a psychological level, they put you in a less than status. And so think equal business stature. You don't need a lot of pleases and thank yous. Be polite, but you don't have to be sort of Pollyanna-ish and Mother May I and cotton candy and all those sorts of things. So it's okay if you want to get a hold of someone to try them. And people may disagree with this on the phone call, but to try them 3 or 4 times within a couple of week period. First call. Hey, Dave, John Rosso. Listen, had a nice conversation with Mike Montague. He and I got around to talking about your business. Thought it would be important we speak. I promised him I would reach out to you. Dave, call me. John Rosso, 888-555-1212. John Rosso, 888-555-1212. He doesn't call back Monday. I'm going to call him Wednesday. Hey, Dave, John Rosso, it is 2:35 Wednesday. Reached out to you early on Monday. Hoped we could connect. Shared with you that Mike Montague and I had a conversation, got around to talking about your business. And again, he thought it would be valuable you and I speak. I did promise him I would reach out to you. It's hard to resist. Now, by the third time, I might end up doing an email or an in-mail. So let me give you a little bit on in-mail tips. And here's a couple things on in-mails and emails. Make them less than 100 words. You don't need, if it's a prospect, if this is your best friend and you're sending jokes, do what you want. But if it's a prospect, I don't want a whole lot of graphic images. I don't want a whole lot of 2 megabyte files because, first of all, let's think about the medium most of us are looking at our emails now. It's a 2-inch screen, 6-inch screen smartphone.
Right.
So we don't have a lot of room. And an example would be I make my emails and my in-mails ideally less than 100 words. You can probably cheat to 120. You're starting to get more than 120, you're losing effectiveness. Every prospecting email that you want to increase response to, you should end with a question mark. Nothing else. No pleases, no thank yous, no look forwards. End with a question mark. And I break my emails or my in-mails, and I'm going to give you some, I think, staggering statistics on this, into 3 key elements. The first element is the personal contact, the personal connection. Dave, had a chance to read your presentation on the changing face of supply chain, delivered at Supply International, October 2015. Really appreciated your insight on where e-commerce is going. period. Second, you want a value, right? Again, here's an example. This is a supply chain one. We've worked with a number of major retailers on loyalty programs and line expansions, increasing the annual buying from top customers from 37 to 127%. So that's a little bit of a value statement or a pain statement or a benefit statement. Why would anyone care? Notice I'm not going into detail. And then I'm going to give you, I've since, where it says, can I help you? I'm not so sure. A quick 10-minute phone call should help us figure it out. I've changed it. This is working so well. It sounds like, and it shortened the words. What I'm leaving now says this. Dave, even if there is no immediate need and only a down the road interest, and I put down the road in quotes, even if there's no immediate need and only a down the road interest, are you open-minded to a 10-minute exploratory conversation? Question mark. Space, John. So number one is personal connection, which often then is reflected in my subject line as well. Two is some kind of value statement, some kind of pain statement, benefit statement, some reason why companies or people like him or her would want to talk to you. And then third is a call to action, even if there's no immediate need, or even if there's no immediate opportunity, depending upon what you sell, even if there's no immediate opportunity and only a down the road interest, are you open to a 10-minute exploratory conversation? Here's what people are finding. On average, let me do InMail for a second. And one of the things that's nice about InMail is people in the business world probably get somewhere between 150 to 250 emails a day. InMails, we probably get 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 a week. So there's a little bit less clutter. And by the way, if they don't respond to you, LinkedIn busts their chops for me. Hey, you didn't respond to John. Would you like to respond to him? So in InMail, for about every 10 InMails our clients are sending out that are targeted, meaning they're under 100 words, you've done the research, you know who you're trying to find, so you're InMailing the right person, you've got a very good value statement, and you've got a good call to action like the one I just did. They're finding about a 50% response rate, meaning 50% of the people you send this to reply. They don't always reply positive. A reply may be, yeah, thanks for reaching out, John. We are all set for the next 2 years and not interested. But of the people who reply back, 50% of those are open-minded to an exploratory phone call. Or on average, there's about a 20, if you do this well, which means you've got to have a good LinkedIn profile behind you as well, because they're going to check your LinkedIn profile. You'll get about a 25% hit rate. What I've shared with our Sandler clients, if you can get anywhere between a 15 and a 25% hit rate, that is unbelievably good, and you're the one who gets a chance to figure out who you want to speak to. So some of the folks said, how do I get to CEOs? I'll give you a couple things. One, a very targeted InMail is a good way to get to a CEO because that's not being screened by her assistant. Or, we didn't talk gatekeepers, Dave, but gatekeepers, if you think about a gatekeeper only has 3 questions. May I ask who's calling? And your company? And will she know what this is regarding? That's
true.
it.
Yeah, it's true.
Yet somehow they've been able to figure out 99% of the time that they need to keep this person out based upon their tells and based upon their tonality. And so one of the things we say is always be nice, but learn to answer a question with a question, but it's an authoritative question. May I ask who's calling? Dave, would you let Mike Montague know that you've got John Rosso on the phone? It's awfully hard to say no to that. So often what happens is he or she will ring up Mike. Mike, you've got John Rosso on the phone. Mike either takes it or Mike says, find out who John's with. I'm sorry, John, did you mention your company? Dave, if you can, please let him know that you've got John Rosso from Sandler Holding. Notice that's a question, but it's a little bit of an authoritative question. Bring Dave, it's John Rosso from Sandler Holding. He either takes it, says put me in the voicemail, or says find out what it's about. But understand, when we deal with gatekeepers, here's what it sounds like. It's you have to interrupt the pattern. Ring, ring. This is a typical bad call. Ring, ring, ring. Mike's office, Dave speaking. Oh, hi. Is Mike available? May I ask who's calling? Yeah, sure. It's John Rosso. John, and your company, Sandler Training. John, will he know what this call is regarding? And you just feel circling the drain. It's the call's not going well because we're sort of put in that box. So we've got to learn how to carry ourselves with the right belief system that we are the cure in many cases for whatever disease they have out there that our products and services sell, and we're looking for facilitated peer-to-peer questions. And so if I've got to use InMail, if I've got to use voicemail, if I've got a call between 7 and 8 in the morning or 5 and 6 at night, I can't tell you how many calls I've made between 5 and 6, and oh my gosh, the only reason why I picked up is I thought it was my husband calling, asking me what time I was going to be home.
I'll tell you what I'm learning, John, and Sandler people know this, but if I go back to the structure of a call, when you had a pattern interrupt, mini upfront contract, right? Now we're going to go into structuring your pain statements. You're doing this same process regardless if it's voice to voice, voicemail, or on an InMail, which is far more productive than an email. So you're doing this same, I guess, process methodology regardless of the medium. And I think most of us have different ways depending on who we're talking to, what's their title, how are we communicating. We fumble our way through voicemail, which I think is actually worse than our cold call. And then we're over here on email, and I can't tell you how many times I've read a book on an email when somebody's just trying to get an appointment. So to your point earlier, so the beauty of this is you're doing the same thing over and over again, which actually creates muscle memory on your end as the salesperson. Mm-hmm. And so you've got your part down, and you can react to whatever they throw at you because you're doing the same thing over and over again, which I love. So help us get to the pain statements, because I've set it up, right? I've leveraged my referral. I've got my mini upfront contract. I've done my pattern interrupt. Now, what's my hook?
Yeah, so what we want to do is, again, it's not about our features and benefits. Nobody cares about you. Sandler used to say, hey, no one cares about you, maybe your mother, right? Selling is not about you. And so I want to be very other-centered, and I want to get in that head of that prospect and really understand what are the challenges they run into. So I'm telling a third-party story. And a third-party story means I'm not saying, Dave, let me ask you, you having problems with, that's a first-party story. Dave, are you having problems with? If this is an approach call and we don't have a relationship already established, I don't know that we've got enough of the trust for him to say, yeah, I got all kinds of problems. So it's a lot safer to tell a third-party story. And in my third-party stories, I am probing, I am casting out, I am fishing for the typical kinds of challenges or problems they may run into that we can fix, and then simply asking a hook question as to whether or not any of those challenges ever been an issue or even worth a 3 to 5 minute discussion. And so often the way we stroke it, often the way we go back to it, if you go back to the structure of a pain story, the first thing I do is I'll often stroke them. Let me demonstrate it to you. But the stroke would sound like this. And I'll usually match and mirror who I'm talking to. Dave, often when I talk to a senior executive at a software company, so again, if I'm calling a senior executive at a software company, I'll say often when I talk to a senior executive, if I was calling the president of a financial services company, often when I talk to presidents of financial services companies, I'm matching and I'm mirroring. They'll often tell us one of 3 things, Dave. And so I'm telegraphing that there's a couple of things that may be relevant. And here's the stroke. I'll do it in my world. Dave, they'll often tell us one of 3 things. One, they've got a senior sales force. They know their products. They're pretty good at what they do. That's a stroke. Occasionally where they get frustrated is they see all this business it's been forecasted. It's in the pipeline, but it just doesn't seem to be coming over the finish line. That's the pain. And that impacts our quarterly cash flow, and that's an impact. So a really nice way to structure a third-party story is stroke, pain, impact. Stroke, pain, impact. And I'll usually fish these out in groups of 3, where my second stroke is really that the first pain is not a problem. So let me show you how these nest, if you will. Dave, often when I talk to senior executives of software companies, they'll tell me one of three things. One, they've got a pretty good sales force. Senior, they're good at what they do. They know their products. Occasionally, where they're frustrated is they've got all this business that's been forecasted. It's in the pipeline. It just doesn't seem to be coming over the finish line, and that impacts cash flow. Or two, listen, they're closing what's in the pipeline. Where we sometimes get frustrated is we're not putting enough good quality new business into that funnel to grow the business the way we want to see it grow. Or maybe we are putting enough new business in and we're closing it, but we're in a very commoditized based industry, so we find our sales team discounting a little bit more aggressive than they need to, and we're just not getting the margin we need to reinvest back into the business. Dave, let me ask you, any of that ever been an issue worth a 3-5-minute conversation? And so what I'm doing there is I'm fishing out what I would believe to be legitimate, real challenges that he may or she may have that I can solve, and then simply asking, is it relevant? Does it resonate? Has it ever been an issue? Are you willing to have a 3 to 5 minute conversation? Small commitments, and then once we have that 3 to 5 minute conversation, I will close for that appointment. So you do need to get good at really understanding the problems you solve and the impacts of those problems to the prospects and clients you serve, and learn how to structure them in a well-packaged stroke, pain, impact story.
So I know you're going to talk to us about actually the structure of a pain story, but if I do stroke, pain, and impact, the homework for those that are listening seems like I would sit back and say, okay, after the last 50 people that I've called to, what are the top 3 reasons why they normally buy from me? So what is it? And then what's the impact of them suffering or having that particular pain? And so I think most of us don't do that. We go right to the benefit. So this is focusing on our customer, not focusing on what we do, which I like. The second thing that I love is that you didn't bullet it. You didn't say, I work with CEOs of software companies like yourself who are frustrated by they just don't close enough business. That doesn't tell the story. By when you're doing the pain and the impact, and maybe you can walk us through the structure of this, you're actually allowing the prospect to put themselves into the movie so they say, oh my gosh, A, credibility, this guy knows what he's talking about, and B, he's talking about me. So those are some subtle things that go on with this particular approach, which I love.
Yeah, perfectly said. I'm not looking, I could have said, Dave, we work with a lot of CEOs who tell us they're frustrated with a long selling cycle. And you know what that is? Intellectual jargon that evokes zero emotional response. Instead, when I say they've got good people, they know their products, they see all this business that's been forecasted, it is in our pipeline, but it doesn't always seem to be coming over the finish line when we forecast it. And now we find ourselves missing forecast, or it's impacting cash flow. They have time to put themselves in that story, is exactly right.
Yeah, I love that. So walk us through, because I know we've got a ton of questions, walk us through some of the, I guess, the structure of that. You did it naturally, of the pain story, but walk us through, is there anything that sticks out that we want to pay attention to on the structure of those pain indicators? Because really these are 30-second commercials in a way, nested into the actual...
That's exactly right. These are 30-second commercials that you can use in your voicemails, if it's the third or fourth voicemail, in your in-mails, when you're networking. And a couple of keys. The reason why we'll give a little bit of a stroke or a compliment, we're not complimenting them, we're complimenting their class of people. When I talk to presidents and owners in technology companies, often they'll say, hey, we got good people, senior, right? So that brings them closer. They don't have to put their hand up yet and go no. The other thing I'll do on the pain piece is I don't say words like always and never here. What we find is we're never able to bring in the business when we forecast it. Well, that's not true. Sometimes we do. So learn to use words like occasionally, from time to time. Those are the things they can admit to easily, because occasionally and from time to time, they do forecast it and it doesn't necessarily coming over the finish line, right? And don't forget the impact. I would say about 50% of the people forget the impact and expect the customer to build the bridge to impact. They don't, right? So when I say, and we don't see our business growing the way we had forecasted it to grow, we don't have the margin we need to reinvest back into the business. Those are impact statements. And then the hook question switches the conversation to them. Dave, any of that, listen, ever been an issue? Is it worth a 3 to 5 minute conversation? All of them. Well, Dave, if you had to pick one, where would you start? Would it be the forecasting, the new business, the discounting? No question, it's the forecasting. Our sales cycle is way too long. I really tell folks to ask only 3 questions. Now, again, don't take me literal, but my questions are this. Dave, when you say it's the sales cycle, it's taking too long, tell me a little bit more about that. And you are inviting them to bond with you and share, and they go, oh my gosh, we got business that's been in a pipeline for at least 14 months. My next thing I'll say is, can you help me for a second? I want to make sure I can see the world from your point of view. Can you give me kind of a real life example? And they pause for a split second and they go, yeah, sure. We got a deal we were quoting for GE, and they start telling a story. Now remember, we've heard this phrase, every time I think about it, I get angry, right? Let them relive that experience, because people buy emotionally. And then my impact question is often, and so because of that, what happens? Well, because of that, I mean, I'm the one who's called on the carpet with the board of directors because I forecasted this. And that's really all you need. If you've been able to switch that table and have that buyer share with you reasons why you should be invited in, it makes sense to close for the appointment. And when people close for the appointment, this is how they screw it up. Well, Dave, sounds like you got a whole lot going on. Maybe we ought to get together. What do you think? That's a terrible way to close, because they go, I think we should. I'll tell you what, I'm hitting my busy season. If you can call me maybe early March, let's pick up this conversation. And you've lost all your momentum because you've ceded control to the prospect, and your tonality sort of blinked on it. Well, I don't know, it sounds like maybe. So one of the things we say for a closing appointment is learn to be a little bit more directive. Always nice, always respectful, but a little bit more directive with regard to closing for an appointment. What it sounds like, hopefully nurturing, he tells me all the impact, or she tells me the impact, and I say, hey, Dave, can I make a suggestion? Yeah, John, what's that? Do this for me. Dave, take a look at your calendar. Let's find a time in the next week, 2 weeks, where you can invite me out for an hour. You and I can talk much more in depth about some of the things you're doing with regard to increasing that forecast accuracy. What's working? What are some of the things you do know you need to change? Pick my brain about the kind of work we do, and then we can figure out together, is there a reason to do some work together? If not, listen, 100% okay. We're very good at what we do. We're not right in every situation, and we could figure that out together. Sound fair? Sure. And if it does make sense, then we can begin to take out our calendars and begin to map out more specifically what would be the steps that your organization and my organization would take to really figure out, does it make sense to do business together? And I've got a very, very professional ending of the call that's committing them to some clarity of next step. Or can I make a suggestion? Do this for me. Let's take out your calendar. Let's schedule a web demo. I mean, there's a lot of ways. It depends what your next step is, depending upon your inside sales, outside sales. So but still, be authoritative.
Yeah, I like a couple things. And by the way, I know we're getting tons of questions, so email your questions in now, so we'll spend the next 5 minutes or so answering those questions. But before we do that, there's some key phrases. One is invite me out. I love that, right? So it's not like, hey, when do you have time available, which then is a subservient thing. You're right out, invite me out. But the thing that sets this up, John, is the fact that you did the impact on your 30-second commercial, your pain statements, and then you had them talk about it. So you had them experience it by, hey, tell me more about that. Hey, you know your business better than I do. Could you give me an example of what that looks like? And now they're talking, they're into it, they're reliving that, they're going into the past and pulling it into the present, which is awesome. And now when you say, hey, do this for me, they're more compliant than it is if you just did a typical, hey, we work on closing ratios. John, I think we're pretty good. We're in the standard, blah, blah, blah. That's a weak call. So these all kind of fit together. And these words, although they look like, they're subtle, this really are psychological trigger words, which is awesome. Yes. So it's part of the package. I like how it's all put together.
Yeah, a couple of good questions that I'll refer. One says, I got to disagree with you about the voicemail. Someone leaves me a voicemail, doesn't leave an explanation. I am not calling you back. And I say this, you're probably right. You're not. But 40% of you are. Remember, 60% still may not. but it's certainly better than the 99%. So that happens to me all. I would never call you back. You may not, nor will I argue with the fact that you may not. Where I'll stake my ground is I'll take 40% callbacks versus 2% callbacks any day of the week. It's not about being perfect. It's about being better. Now, I have had people who have in my classes, because they became clients, that said to me, I would never call you back. And I said, Dave, that's how I got a hold of you. You know,
Right,
you mean you'll never
right.
call me back? So and the other thing I'll say is, it always comes down to, if what you're doing is working, keep doing it, no matter what I say. But if you're not getting the results you need, you've got to try something. You really got to try something different from that perspective.
Well, the worst case is, before you go to the next question, is that person would recognize your name, chances are, when you do your follow-up call, versus doing nothing, and you're going to get the same result.
Yeah, that's exactly right. 2 days later, I may leave another message. 3 days later, I may leave that more full voicemail message that someone prefers, that would say, hey, Dave, John Russo, I know I left you a message or two. Sandler training here. As I mentioned, I saw your presentation at Supply Chain International. Reason why I'm reaching out to you is we can help you in area ABC. You're going to get to that eventually. But what I found early is curiosity wins a whole lot more than the specificity, unless your tonality is so darn good. This is a real way to become a real way to get effective.
So, John, we've got a question from France. It says, how do I differentiate myself in a competitive market? And it's a lot of buyers and sellers out there, without talking negatively about my competition. Now, that was written midway through, but is it just strictly through the pain statements?
Well, I think a lot of it is you're differentiating yourself by what I would call being disarmingly honest. And we talk a lot about being disarmingly honest in the book. It's that willingness to be authentic and to say things that seem to be negative against you, like it may not make sense to talk, or we're not right for everyone. Those are very disarmingly honest words. And so you're differentiating in style, in tone, in words. Now, again, there are times when people say, and this was one of the questions as well, listen, I'm happy with who we're using. I get it, Dave. Listen, not a problem at all. I'm glad we had a chance to connect. May not make any sense to move forward. Question for you, what do you like about them? Right, that's an easy question. Well, they're on time, their pricing is good, and everything is hunky-dory. I love the rep. Dave, no one's perfect, fair statement? Well, I would agree with that. I'm not suggesting I have any additional answers, don't misunderstand, but if there was even one small thing that they could do differently or better, what do you think it would be? And if you get a wedge, great, work it. Now, for those of you who want to take the nuclear option, pay attention on this. There are times when I go, I'm completely happy, and I say, can I ask you a really hard question? But I need you to promise me in advance you won't get mad at me for asking. Now, I won't get mad at you. Dave, how long have you been with him? 15 years. When was the last time you invited someone else out to even begin to think through what that loyalty could be costing you? That's a tough question. Now, they'll say, well, what do you mean? Wait a minute. What do you mean? I said, Dave, I'm not suggesting it's costing you anything. I'm not even so sure I can help. I do know it makes sense likely for us to sit down and just talk more. A little bit about your world. At worst case, I validate you're 100% okay. I'm going in with my eyes open. There's no expectations on my side. We have a good business conversation. And I've closed business that way because it made sense to sort of get in. But you differentiate based upon equal business stature. Sandler's, one of my favorite Sandler rules is, I'm financially independent and I don't need the business. And I constantly think, if I were financially independent and I didn't need the business, I wasn't an arrogant SOB. I absolutely felt I could change people's lives or businesses with my solutions, but I'm not an arrogant SOB. What would I say? I would say what David Sandler taught me.
Yeah, I think, listen, I love the nobody's perfect. I remember I got one of my largest deals after they called me in and said, you're here because of the referral. We have absolutely no interest in moving forward. We've been happy with our current supplier now for the last 10 years. Closed my books, and I did exactly what you said, which is Sandler taught us. Hey, that's awesome. What do you love about them? And then I did the nobody's perfect. They could do one thing better. Probably couldn't, but what would it be? Boom. It was awesome. And you have to remember, financially independent, I don't need the business. And also, it's a prospecting call. Some will, some won't.
Right.
Let's move on. It's not like you're losing your right arm. Take a shot. It's okay. Hey, listen, I want my customers to defend me. It's okay. John, I want to thank you for coming on today. We have covered a lot of ground. We've covered the formula, which we've been using for years at Sandler. For those Sandler clients, you should recognize parts of that. That'll make it easier for you to get appointments. We learned slight edge stuff, which is to take the same thing that we do verbally and apply it to voicemail, apply it to email. We talked about in-mail. We talked about leveraging our referral base, which is awesome. And I think throughout, which we've said, but you really got to pick up the tonality. I always remember what my mom said. It's not what you said, David. It's how you said it, right? Before I felt the bam. So I think you can have higher results if you follow the methodology, but also just change the way. Take a deep breath. The way that you talk to your friends and the way that you talk to a gatekeeper are completely different. And if you tape yourself, you'd realize it just sounds like night and day. So I want to say thank you to everyone coming in. I know we've got thousands of people on the line. Couple offers. One, if you want to see what John's doing today in your local backyard, I promise you there is no better trainers out there than Sandler trainers, because as you saw John kicking in and out of role play, we eat our own dog food. We sell every day. We close every day. We manage sales forces. So you're going to have total credibility. Go to a Sandler site, look up free session, and go to a training center. Pick the topic. Maybe it's not prospecting. Maybe it's closing, or maybe it's networking or LinkedIn. Whatever you pick, it's up to you. But sit in and just absorb. Whether we do business or not, doesn't really matter. But I remember in 1986, I sat through a free session and I said, wow, that changed my life. Second thing, number one selling book within our Sandler group is our prospecting book written with John. So go to the Sandler shop. If you get a discount for coming on, investing your time with us today. But everything that John has said, and tons more, obviously, because we only had an hour together, you'll have the opportunity to just keep over and over listening to this broadcast, which we will certainly post, and everything else that went with it, but you'll also be able to read all the things that we didn't cover here today. So I want to thank the Sandler clients again for your support and patronage over the years. And for those that are looking, hey, check us out. Until we see each other again, good selling.